Yes, I have pleasure in announcing that the Cabinet met earlier today and has decided to select the Amicon Consortium's bid to build ANZAC frigates for the Royal Australian Navy. The decision by the Cabinet was to contract for 10 ships with provision to take out options for either 8 or 12, depending at least in part on decisions taken by our New Zealand colleagues when they have an opportunity to determine that sometime later this month.
Instead of their normal sitting, the Hunter Parliamentary Task Force went walkabout, armed with comfortable shoes and hard hats. The 14 team members heard that work is now 6 months ahead of schedule, and the extra funds will boost the number of people employed to get the hospital up and running.
So this isn't just something that's important for Rankin Park or the people of Newcastle. This is a major development, one of the largest public works projects ever let in New South Wales. And in terms of what it means for the Hunter, we can take enormous pride in the fact that the project is local, a local builder, a local project. It's on budget and ahead of time, and that's something that should make us very proud.
Though the team were impressed, they expressed disappointment that some materials were not Australian-made.
All of us were disappointed to find that there are things in the hospital, such as the floor, the vinyl flooring, which simply aren't available in Australia, and it can't but help you realise how important some projects, for example, such as the frigates, would have been in terms of helping us develop some new technology in the region so that we can use local products more extensively.
Mrs Chadwick, as head of the task force, also announced further funds for the Hunter breast screening project and oncology services, extra staff for the Royal Newcastle Hospital's recovery ward, plus extra cash to reduce orthopaedic waiting lists. 2 more positions will be added to Windale Gateshead Dental Clinic, and more money will help the Wansley Limited Care Dialysis Centre in Newcastle.
Fourteen service organisations, which include the Ambulance Association, Telecom, the RAAF, Newgas, Customs and the Police, gathered at Hamilton to engage in friendly combat. The Versatility Fours is played over 5 games to decide the winner, and there were some pretty reasonable bowlers who donned the creams today. Tony Zermack, who only yesterday teamed with Sam Lagusa to win the Newcastle District Pairs title, was representing the Maritime Services Board, and beaten semi-finalist in the pairs Joe Wilmot was rolling along for the Electricity Commission. 56 bowlers took part in the day, and in the end it was a half a point that separated the top 2 teams. And it was the MSB who grabbed the 1989 title from the defending champions, the Police.
Next year commemorates the 75th anniversary of the Gallipoli campaign, a landing that cost more than 7,500 Australian lives and 19,000 wounded. By the end of the 8-month assault, more than 50,000 Allied troops lay dead and at least 90,000 Turkish soldiers died. The enormous sacrifice and loss of life in a failed campaign is enshrined April 25th in our national heritage. In a move to pay respects to the ageing diggers who fought in the campaign and other World War I veterans, the federal government has launched a free commemoration tour next year.
At the moment, we believe there could be up to 150 alive Australia-wide, but many of them may not have been back near the government or back near the RSLs, might have chosen to keep a little bit quiet and a low profile. We're keen that the family and friends of those veterans or the veterans themselves approach us direct.
Are you confident that there are a number in the Newcastle area?
Yes, we are confident. We believe that there could be 3, 4, two for sure, but there could be others that we'd like to contact, including other World War I veterans.
The tour will leave Sydney with stopovers in Singapore and Bahrain before arriving at Istanbul for ceremonies on ANZAC Day with other Allied servicemen and Turkish soldiers. John Bright from the Department of Veteran Affairs says the Australians will also take a special gift to mark one of the campaign's biggest battles.
But originally some cones were brought back from the Lone Pine Ridge. One of those cones was planted at the War Memorial in Canberra and has since been shedding cones for some years. And I'm told by reliable sources that we have a couple of very vigorous young pine trees growing in Canberra and they're to be taken back next year and planted at Lone Pine. Maybe we'll call it Double Pine.
Former diggers interested in making the trip should contact the Department of Veteran Affairs in Canberra. Darren Curtis for NBN News.
Residents of Awabba dug in their heels for a long campaign against the proposed gravel quarry, putting forward health and environmental reasons against the operation. Although a council committee agreed with the residents and last night rejected the plan, the locals say they won't take their protest banners down just yet.
We're just a little bit cautious at the moment. The council committee last night decided to reject the application from Quizrock. We're waiting till next Monday night at a full council meeting to have that rejection verified or ratified by council.
Mayor of Lake Macquarie and member for Swansea Ivan Welsh says he was sympathetic to the residents, but he says the quarry company, Quizrock, will be putting forward a proposal for another site. Just where, he's not at liberty to say, but the broad hint was pretty clear.
Oh yes, I've spoken to the company about that. They're looking at other sites, and one of them, which is fairly sensitive at the moment, would be preferable, because instead of damming creeks, which they intended to do on the Awabba site, they'll be able to use water from a flooded mine and then use the slurry from that to go down a mine which is on fire, which will obviously be good for putting out the fire.
Unless there's an identical location somewhere else, the only possible site is the Rhondda mine on the other side of Terralba. It's a site the Mayor supports this time, but he says he has no doubt the proposal will meet another wave of local opposition.
Oh, for sure, yeah, for sure. Everywhere we go, we get a protest lodged, so yeah, there's no problem about having a protest. We have one of them every day.
Okay, thanks.
Cessnock has the unenviable record of having some of the worst roads in the state. They have taken such a pounding in recent years that once the pavement is cracked, more damage is done by the big volume of traffic. Cessnock parliamentarian Bob Roberts says $11 million is to be spent on the area over 3 years, particularly on the Mulbring to Branxton Road.
Yes, this is the biggest allocation in the electorate's history for the road running from Mulbring through to Branxton, and it'll be all for construction purposes, for rehabilitation and get things up and running.
It's hoped the extra money will help reduce the road toll in the area by 25%. Mr Roberts believes the funding is a direct result of the recent Cessnock Council inquiry that turned up deficiency in the area's road system. He says he cannot put a firm date on when construction work will start, but residents shouldn't be alarmed if they don't see improvement overnight.
There will be a lot more maintenance money coming through. This is for construction, but there'll be more money coming through than Cessnock's ever had in its life before.
The Belmont 16-foot sailing club has won approval for major extensions. This will see the club build a further 12 metres over the water with an outside viewing deck bordering the complex. Mindful of resident opposition, Lake Macquarie Council has imposed a list of special conditions on the development. These include unrestricted public access to the viewing deck during club opening hours. However, Council's public-minded intention has backfired. Allowing the general public on the viewing deck would contravene the Registered Clubs Act, as club premises are only open to members, their guests or bona fide travellers. Council's vision of a Queen's Wharf-type development is in this instance clearly outside the law. Confronted with this piece of information, a spokesman admitted Council wasn't aware the development condition would contravene licensing laws. Even prior to today's developments, residents who campaigned against the extensions were unimpressed.
How do residents feel about the decision made by Council last night?
Very bitter. We didn't think Council would go ahead with it. I hope there's enough aldermen to realise that they won't get in next year from the residents in this area. We're very, very disappointed with Council.
Newcastle is regarded as a microcosm of the Australian economy, and the impact of the budget on local business is likely to be reflected nationally. Business people were up bright and early after a night of budget viewing to share reactions and exchange views. Directors of the Chamber of Commerce addressed the gathering and later fielded questions. BHP Rod and Bar Products Division General Manager Rob Chainery says the economy is growing at a much faster rate than estimated by the Treasurer.
I think we've got to be prepared for a downturn in the economy next year. Hopefully it will be a soft landing, and in the long term we should continue to look at our business in terms of adding value and trying to go high technology as a philosophy rather than exporting raw materials as a sole philosophy of business.
In light of the need for value adding, the loss of the Frigate contract and its technology could hurt Newcastle more than first realised.
The Frigate decision is a bit disappointing to me in that it would have brought to the hunter a high technology and transfer of knowledge in electronics, which would have been a very valuable base for a new industry and other industries in the valley. And I think that that's what we'll miss more than anything. But regardless of that, all industry in the valley can increase their high technology and move up that value-adding chain.
Jeff McDermott, a partner in Ernst & Young, says business will also feel the impact of earlier company tax payments.
Well, having a predominance of industry here certainly brings into light the impact of high interest rates on the future cash flows, business survival, business success in the hunter. The bringing forward of the corporate tax payments will certainly be a bit of a slug for the companies in the hunter, especially the profitable ones. That's going to take a huge amount out of their cash flows coming July 1990.
In summary, Mr McDermott says the budget has an all too familiar ring.
I had a certain sense of deja vu hearing his speech, talking about the investment imports that have been coming in, the productive capacity that's going to generate, leading to import replacement. Namely, the J-curve's happening next year rather than 2 years ago when he first raised it. So, in my view, it does make it difficult for business to be able to plan long term when really the predictive statistics they rely on haven't really come to the fore.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The Consultative Committee was one of the more highly publicised results of the Steel Industry Development Agreement. It means representatives from the Rod and Bar Parts Division management, employees and union representatives come together on a 3-monthly basis to discuss how the company is performing and address any issues affecting them. Today was the initial meeting, and Maury Rudd of the Federated Ironworkers Association admitted there was plenty of nerves when the delegates faced each other for the first time.
So it was pretty tentative at first, but it got off pretty well, and once barriers seemed to be broken down, well then people sat there and asked questions, relevant questions, and no one was worried about what they asked, and the company didn't hedge in any of the answers they gave.
Recently, BHP announced it would be importing steel from New Zealand, a decision which has raised plenty of questions about job security among union ranks. Today, that was one of the first topics to be covered.
They wanted to know New Zealand steel and why we're buying New Zealand steel, and we gave them the best answer we could there, and I think they were satisfied with that answer.
Can you tell us what the answer was?
Well, that's confidential business information. I'm afraid I can't in this case.
In fact, most of what was discussed today will remain under wraps, with management providing delegates with delicate information about financial matters. But all involved were united in giving the relationship between management and employees the big thumbs up.
New Zealand have begun a scheme to try and bridge the gap between their international bowlers and the players at the next level, national and club players. And the New Zealand Bowling Association has brought 5 players to Australia for a series of tournaments. After meeting various sporting internationals from the Hunter Valley at a special dinner last night, it was down to serious business today at the Cahaiba Bowling Club. 5 players from the Newcastle district, Bob King, Sam Lagusa, George Dawes, Doug Howard and Bob Fishlock, took on the Kiwi contingent of Brian Baldwin, Jeff Hawken, Peter Shaw, Graham Stanley and Paul Wilton in singles, pairs, triples and fours. At the end of the first day's play, it's all Newcastle with wins in the pairs 24-14, in the triples 32-8 and the singles went to George Dawes of Newcastle 25-4. The Kiwis won the fours convincingly 24-15. Play resumes at 9:30 tomorrow morning at the Cahaiba Bowling Club.
Last year's safari had only 62 finishes out of 190 starters, 9,000 kilometres of hard work. So hard that this year it's been cut back to 6,500 kilometres. Less distance, but the same punishment. Tomorrow the competitors leave for Parkes, but from there daily routes are released, zigzagging through 3 states to Darwin. Alan Bauer and his son Ron are entering their 3rd safari. Last year they finished 30th overall. And this year, in the same vehicle, an 85 Nissan Diesel Patrol, they're looking for higher honours. Last-minute checkups today revealed preparations for a tough 10 days of competition. The Nissan's chassis has been reinforced, and steel plates have been added to protect the front diff from the unexpected. The suspension on each wheel has been doubled.
It's very rugged conditions. You're through dried creek beds, down through gorges, over sand, through mud, every type of area you could think of coming over.
Central Coast off-roader Warren Ridge is also entering his 3rd safari, and also in a Nissan Patrol. Warren's vehicle is, however, petrol-driven. Apart from some fine-tuning to the 150 horsepower under the hood and structural reinforcements, this vehicle is basically the production model. The 6-cylinder has the potential to top the 160k mark, and Warren, who says he wants to finish in the top 10, says he'll have his foot down. It costs $2,500 just to enter the safari. The machines cost tens of thousands, and in some cases hundreds of thousands to set up. And the racing is hot and dirty, which begs the question, why do it?
Once you're involved in this side of motorsport, it becomes something that you really enjoy doing. The justification, you sometimes wonder yourself at the cost, but it is really a rewarding an event that is certainly, it's hard to explain, but it's very, very enjoyable.
Newcastle Lord Mayor John McNaughton admitted that council was concerned by a pattern of negative growth which he hoped would be reversed by this land release and others in the future. The 200-hectare block is tucked into a site bordered by Lenigan's Drive, John Renshaw Drive and the New England Highway. Much of the land was included in a mining lease and buffer for the Ironbark Colliery, but under ministerial direction that boundary has been moved. Approval for the mine is still under consideration, but it would operate under restrictions to allow for the construction of brick veneer homes, which would still be bordered by a 1 kilometre buffer zone. Minister Neil Pickard says the compromise meets two important needs in the valley.
I think it shows a sane approach to the whole question of how you house people in affordable housing on good quality land and don't take jobs or mining opportunities with jobs away from the people.
Council will make several $1 million from sales of the land blocks, which are likely to be all the more attractive when the F3 freeway connects with the New England Highway. Mr Pickard showed less sympathy for the plight of Singleton residents facing the prospect of open-cut mining at Rix's Creek. In response to questioning by reporters, the Minister showed no inclination to reverse that decision.
If people built there after the event, by permission of a council that had already previously agreed and approved to the mining going on, then somehow the council and the people have got to work that out. But jobs are important, aren't they?
Although the site near Beresfield is now free for residential development, it's understood the new land blocks won't go on the market until the early 1990s.
The Newcastle District Bowling Association is one of the strongest in the world, so it was no surprise that the visiting Kiwis found the competition very tough yesterday. The locals dominated their rivals in the singles, the pairs and the triples, only going down in the fours. Day 2 of the competition was fortunately not interrupted by the intermittent rain. In the fours, Neville Hards, Pat Barwick, Ross Ball and Glenn Brown for Newcastle lined up against the strong New Zealand contingent of Paul Wilton, Jeff Hawken, Graham Stanley and Peter Shaw. The locals bowled brilliantly, easily eclipsing their rivals 24-10. One of New Zealand's best respected players, Brian Baldwin, faced Mick Beasley for Newcastle in the singles in a very tightly fought match. Mick eventually managed to hold off the Kiwi, winning 25-19. This afternoon, Newcastle also won the triples 18-7, but went down in the pairs 23-17. Eglo is currently working to full capacity, building sections of the second FFG frigate for Amicon's shipyard in Victoria. The modules built here will be barged down to Williamstown for assembly. The company will do much the same sort of work for Amicon on the ANZAC frigates, although this time the pieces will stay in Newcastle for assembly probably at a revamped State Dockyard facility. Eglo is a member of the Transfield Group, which also owns Amicon, but manager Otto Bruin insists the company isn't guaranteed any work.
We'll have to be competitive. We'll have to tender on these jobs the same like everybody else has to do.
However, Herr Bruin admits it is very likely Eglo will receive a large slice of the local work. Meanwhile, a grey sky was a fitting backdrop as AWS lowered the flag on its Newcastle operations today.
I'd hoped this would be flying for 20 years. Seeing each ship launched.
The AWS office was open to high expectations in March this year. However, instead of growing to hold 200 staff, it remained simply the Newcastle manager and company secretary as the AWS executives grew more doubtful they would secure the contract. Even as AWS moved out, the face of the State Dockyard site was changing. The Department of Public Works is spending $300,000 to remove the old asbestos cladding and roofing. Amicon has said it plans to do shipbuilding on the site, but has no intention of creating the sort of high-tech Vision Splendid which AWS had proposed. AWS will finally say goodbye.
The Reserve Bank always chooses its words carefully, but its annual report today would not have pleased the government. Issued by the bank's acting governor, John Phillips, it says current high interest rates should restrain spending, but not necessarily enough to wind back our big current account deficit. In Parliament today, the Prime Minister repeated his assertion that interest rates